All right, let's get right into it. We're going to pull back the curtain on the hidden psychological forces that are constantly guiding our decisions. You know, those invisible triggers that make us say yes, a lot of times without us even having a clue why.
I mean, really think about it for a second. That time you bought something you totally didn't need, or maybe you agreed to a favor you really didn't have time for. Have you ever just walked away from a conversation with that kind of gross feeling that you were just played? Well, here's some good news. It's probably not some personal weakness or a character flaw. What happened is you were likely on the receiving end of some seriously powerful psychological principles. These things have been honed over centuries, and frankly, we are all just wired to respond to them.
And that brings us to a really fascinating question. Why? Why do we comply so automatically? What is going on inside our brains that makes us so susceptible to persuasion? You see, the brilliant Dr. Robert Cialdini explains that our brains have developed all these little shortcuts to deal with the insane amount of information we face every single day. They're kind of like pre-programmed response tapes. The problem? Well, skilled persuaders know exactly which buttons to push to play those tapes for their own benefit. So what are these buttons? What are these triggers? Cialdini identified 6 main weapons of influence that kickstart our automatic compliance. And honestly, just understanding them is the first huge step to defending against them. Here they are: reciprocity, commitment and consistency, social proof, liking, authority, and the big one, scarcity. So let's break down what each of these actually looks like out in the real world. Okay, first up, reciprocity. This is a basic, fundamental rule of pretty much every human society. If someone does something nice for you, you feel this deep, almost overwhelming need to do something for them in return. It's just baked into us. And this is the classic example, right? The gift of a flower or a book, even one you didn't ask for and don't really want, it creates this powerful sense of indebtedness. That urge to repay the social debt is so strong that people will often just give money to make that uncomfortable feeling go away. It is an incredibly powerful tool. All right, let's talk about the second weapon: commitment and consistency. We have this deep need to be, and maybe more importantly, to appear consistent with what we've already done. So once we make a choice or take a stand on something, we feel all this pressure to behave in a way that matches that commitment. And here's the wild part. This drive can actually make us stick to a bad decision. Once we've publicly committed, say to a project or even a relationship, we start building all this mental scaffolding around it to justify our choice, even if all the evidence is screaming at us to change course. Our own desire to be consistent can literally trap us. Next up is social proof. And oh man, this one is huge in our hyper-connected world. Basically, when we're unsure of ourselves, when a situation is ambiguous, we look to what other people are doing to figure out how we should act. It's the herd mentality. But this principle has a really dark side. In an emergency, if nobody else is doing anything, we automatically assume it must not be a real emergency. Everyone is looking to everyone else for cues, and this collective inaction, what psychologists call pluralistic ignorance, can lead to absolutely tragic consequences. It just shows how powerful our instinct to follow the crowd really is. The fourth weapon is liking. Now, this one sounds super simple, but it is incredibly effective. We just prefer to say yes to people we know and like. And things like physical attractiveness, being similar to us, or even just receiving a compliment can dramatically increase how much we like someone, and therefore how likely we are to agree to what they want. And this is where things get really clever. A Tupperware party, it's not really about the plastic containers, is it? It's a masterclass in using the liking principle. You're not buying from some random salesperson. You're buying something to support your friend, the host, in a room full of other friends. The social pressure to comply is just immense. Okay, on to weapon number 5, authority. From the time we're little kids, we are trained to believe that obedience to authority is the right thing to do. And this leads to a kind of automatic deference to experts and people we see as authority figures. Nothing demonstrates this more shockingly than the famous Milgram experiments. You had people who are willing to give what they thought were painful, even dangerous electric shocks to another person simply because a guy in a lab coat told them to. Get this, it wasn't the person, it was the symbol of authority, the coat, that was commanding their obedience. Chilling. And finally, we have scarcity. It's simple. When something is less available, our desire for it just skyrockets.
The thought of losing out on an opportunity is a way more powerful motivator than the thought of gaining something of the exact same value. We hate to miss out.
And you see this principle absolutely everywhere, from retail's limited time offers to the world of romance. The Romeo and Juliet effect shows that when an outside force, like disapproving parents, threatens a couple's freedom to see each other, their bond actually deepens and their desire for each other gets more intense. The relationship itself becomes a scarce resource that they have to protect. So we've seen these 6 weapons in action, but the big question remains, why are they so darn effective? Why do our brains just default to this kind of autopilot mode? Well, it all comes down to one word: efficiency. Doing a full, conscious analysis of every single decision we make would be slow, exhausting, and just use up way too much brain power. So mental shortcuts are the opposite. They're fast, they're automatic, they're efficient. It's what Cialdini calls the click-whir response. A trigger, that's the click, activates a standard type of behavior, that's the whir. And this right here is the central trade-off. In our unbelievably complex, information-flooded world, we need these shortcuts just to function. We couldn't get through the day without them. But that very reliance on them makes us vulnerable to people who know exactly how to trigger our automatic responses for their own personal gain. Now, this all might sound a little bit bleak, but it's really not, because knowledge is power. Now that we know about the weapons, we can actually learn how to build up our defenses. The real key is to create a kind of mental bubble, just a moment of mindfulness. When you feel that rush, that emotional tug to just comply immediately, that's your click-whir response kicking in. And the single best defense is to just pause. By taking a breath and creating just a little bit of space, you can step outside of that automatic reaction and ask yourself one simple question. Wait, why am I about to say yes to this? That single moment of reflection is often all you need to break the spell and take back control. In the end, you can think of our automatic responses as the software our brain runs to get us through the day. But we have to remember that other people can access that software. So the question I want to leave you with is this. Now that you know how the system works, are you going to be more mindful of who's trying to write your code?